Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody to the April edition of the Tips and Tricks SIG. Our format will be typically we'll have our open forum, and then from there we can break into some of the topics that I'd sent out in our email as potential topics for the evening. That being said, who'd like to open up the floor with the first question of the evening? We have no questions of the evening. Dennis does.
Okay, I'm on mute. Okay. I was using Macarum Reflect last week or the week before, and I made a rescue disk. I made a backup. I don't know when this popped up on me, but at one point, I don't know what I was doing. A message popped up that said, "Do you want to add Macarum Reflect to the boot menu?" And it kind of startled me. I didn't know. I didn't expect what that was. I didn't know what that was. So I said no. But then I thought about it after the fact, and I thought, is this something to change my BIOS, or what was it asking me, and what is it changing?
It was your BIOS wanting to know if you wanted to have that as a regular bootable device. And normally speaking, you wouldn't do that because as soon as you're done with a backup or a restore, you remove the drive and put it in a safe place. Bob?
No, that's not what it's doing. Macarum Reflect has a rescue that is an onboard rescue that you can add to the boot menu using, I think it's BCD.
Oh, okay.
And it becomes part of the Windows boot. I have it. It's just an additional rescue option where you have this onboard copy of the rescue media. So you don't. So if you can't get to the USB and Windows won't boot, this is another thing you could do.
So you think it's a good idea to go ahead and have it do that?
Yeah, it boots into the same thing as the rescue environment, but it has fewer options.
So, if I may, isn't it? It's so it becomes part of your boot menu.
Yeah, you have the option. You get a little blue screen that has something saying boot into Windows, and then there's a sort of a mouse icon that says boot into Macarum Reflect. And that is the WinPE or WinRE environment.
Okay.
Same as it would be from USB, but no, Macarum Reflect does not mess with your BIOS.
Well, they're probably taking an exact copy of the rescue media and making a separate partition that's about the same size as the UEFI partition, and that way it's made bootable and different from all the partitions related to Windows.
Technically, it contains what is known as a WIM.
So if later on there was an update, I put in an update to the BIOS, which I've never done. But if I ever updated my BIOS, would that wipe that out then?
No. This is entirely contained within Windows Boot.
Okay.
So it's in your system drive.
Okay.
It's not in your BIOS. Your BIOS is not being messed with, and no program should ever mess with your BIOS for some pretty good reasons.
Okay.
The only program that should mess with your BIOS is your manufacturer's BIOS update. And there are some interesting things about what USB can do to mess you up.
Great question, Dennis. Next question, new direction? No. Pete?
I finally
glad to see you could chime in.
It was really slow connecting. I don't know how good my connection is going to be because of the little thing that's happening in the Middle East.
Oh, that little thing that's happening in the Middle East. They keep sucking in all that bandwidth you have.
Well, when your supercomputer on the island controls most of the crap that's over there, including the conversations to the planes and the drones and the rest of the world, it sort of takes up some bandwidth.
How do you get to know what bandwidth is available? Do you guys have a meter out there that tells you your availability?
No, you just know that when it starts to circle, do the circly thingy, that they are limiting bandwidth by a big deal. Because typically we don't get that. And typically because of the size of that pipe, there's no problems.
Is that because you're in Hawaii? Or why is that happening specifically?
Why is it happening? Okay, I'll give you the medium explanation. On the island of Hawaii, down in Kihei, is the military DoD supercomputer for the whole Pacific and the Middle East. And our fiber is controlled through that because the fiber connection is the fiber pipe is about this big around. I know, I haven't seen it, but I had a friend that was actually controlling the supercomputer for a while. The DoD. You would think it would be over on Oahu, but it isn't. It comes into here, and then it goes from here to Oahu. And because of the military bases on Oahu and on all the other islands, this is the hub. So the main pipe from the mainland comes here. And all of our other connections, all the civilian connections come along that same pipe. And typically there's more than enough bandwidth for that pipe for everybody that does their little thingies here. But when the military is on full red alert and controlling five carrier groups out there, the bandwidth sort of gets knocked down. And then we also have all the undersea listening ports that go in through Kauai.
Interesting. All right, thank you.
Now we all been educated.
As well as the telescopes on the Big Island in here that also control all the military space force.
You know, my whole life, Pete, it's like, people dream of, I like to, for the rest of my life, I like to live in Hawaii. What a great place to live, Hawaii. And after the last few meetings, it's like, I'm not quite thinking that way anymore. I don't know.
You know what? If you take Hawaii and you take California, which the weathers are about the same, Hawaii is way up here and California is way down there. The costs are about the same. The politics are a little bit nicer here in Hawaii than in California. Not much, but better. If you want to weigh those out, temperature, cost of living is about the same. Our gas is a little cheaper because we actually have a refinery on Oahu for the military. But all our gas does come from the Far East because of the Jones Act. Look up Jones Act and shipping and you'll figure that out.
Yeah.
There are very
Right.
limited
We need to move on to topics that are computer related. It's not the Jones Act, okay? It has to do with shipping. And I agree with you about that Jones Act. Bad act. Okay, does anyone have any group questions for the group and related to computers and technology? Okay, not. I had sent out some topics in our email, and feel free to pick one out and we can pull it up as an item to discuss tonight. Bob, you have your hand up?
Yeah, there is an item not on the list as far as I know.
Okay.
There's this new super AI called Claude Mythos, which they are deciding not to release to the public. It's not because it's going to kill us all. It's because They don't want black hat hackers to get a hold of it. It can analyze code and find vulnerabilities and chain together vulnerabilities something like between 100 and 1,000 times faster than ever before, with about 78% accuracy. And they want the big tech companies. They want the big tech companies. Anthropic did this. They want the big tech companies to have first crack at it to see whether they need to patch anything. This includes the Linux Foundation, but remember, the Linux Foundation is not the Linux community. It's controlled mostly by Microsoft.
Okay, but this is not one that's going to be available to us.
No, they do not want that. They don't want your bank to get hacked.
Oh, well, then why should I know about this?
Because it's been in the headlines quite a lot. There's
Okay.
finally a truly dangerous AI, and it happens to be from the company the U.S. military just banned.
In the news, Gen Z has the highest rate of hackers. You give them Mythos, and believe me, they can wipe out any nation's economy with what that thing can do.
Yeah, until things get patched.
Is this the one that Pete Hegseth said we're not going to do contracts with anymore because they wouldn't release everything?
No,
Is this the same?
that's
It's the same
all.
company. It's the same company, but a different AI.
Right. See,
And it's kind of interesting.
The military wants to use AI, and the employees and owners of Claude, Anthropic, don't want their product used by the military.
Yeah, they don't want it used for autonomous control of lethal weapons, especially powerful ones, because the decision making would then be taken out of the hands of humans. So that's where these issues are coming in. First, the power of AI with coding, and Claude was always one of the best at that. Second, the sophistication of the younger generations, the digital natives, and including people who are up to no good here and elsewhere. Third, the fact that this is not exactly the next level of AI, but it's a huge advance. We will see it one day, but just probably a year or two from now.
Didn't they also express concern that it might be used for increased domestic surveillance?
There were others who expressed that concern. That is not what Anthropic said. That's not what the Glasswing Consortium said. Glasswing consists of all these tech companies that will have access to it. And it is closed source, so it's a black box.
Harry, they're watching you even without it.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that.
And
So-
you said there was something else that was not in my list?
Yeah. In other news, my state, Massachusetts, just passed an age verification law that uses a third party. And at least it passed our House. And I think it's app-centric, not OS-centric.
So I guess I shouldn't admit this since we're taping this, but I've done a little bit of the reading. I'm not sure that I fully understand the controversy. Without hitting me over the head, could someone just give me one or two of the pros, one or two of the cons? What's the controversy about the age verification?
It's supposed to be protecting young children. Its primary focus is towards social media, but the legislators have decided that age verification must be in the OS so that any and all apps can query the OS for the age of the individual user, assuming that an adult with a child in the household steps away from their computer, leaving it going with their adult credentials, the child could end up seeing content just like they can now without age verification.
So the controversy is over the implementation.
Basically, little to no social media of any kind under 13. I'm not sure if the 13-year-old is included. And then they break it up into maybe 3 other categories, like 13 to 15, 15 to 18, and over 18. Some states have it to 4 levels. Some states have it only 3 levels.
Yeah, mine I think uses a 4-level triage. It's not a triage, but a quadrage. And here's where the controversy is. In my state, verification is required. That means you have to present valid credentials to a third party. And they will use an API which is either controlled by that third party or which lives within your operating system. But the third party is doing the verifying, which means they're building a database of identities and ages of adults.
But the thing is, Discord is classified social media. They had a third party collecting and verifying that age information, and they had a massive data breach. So all that information collected is now on the dark web for sale. Now, who is going to protect our databases of our age verification information so that it is not part of a data breach? Are our legislators going to take personal responsibility financially for any and all losses? I doubt it.
Oh,
I think the responsibility would be upon the third party where one is used. But if no third party is used and it's the operating system vendor who's liable.
Yeah,
And
but that third party vendor wouldn't be responsible without legislation from individual states or the nation mandating it.
Yeah, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know about this. But what I do know is that if the operating system developers are being held accountable, first, for making sure this is implemented, and second, for making sure that it works, under threat of huge fines, that is going to close down open source software completely.
That's the other thing. Now, for Microsoft, Apple, they won't care that much. But Linux doesn't have a single entity like Microsoft and Apple have. You have umpteen hundreds, maybe thousands of developers of both the OS and applications worldwide. Where does that jurisdiction
Dennis had his hand up. Dennis?
I was just going to ask, and then Tim started explaining what I was going to ask. So.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, so it works through APIs, some of which are actually available now. And the third parties, there have been third-party verifiers before. So implementing it is technically feasible. There were early arguments that it wasn't because Linux handles accounts differently from Windows, but that's a different matter. And servers handle accounts differently from individual PCs. But I think enterprises are exempt.
Government is exempt. All the government agencies. We don't know about like colleges and K through 12. We don't know about medical institutions like hospitals and stuff like that, and doctors' offices, etc. So there's a big gaping hole as to who is covered and who is not. It seems to be geared towards the consumer market and not businesses or government.
Or other institutions. Yes, correct. The other thing that I was going to say, these databases could be federalized. What does that do? if the data are then shared with the federal government, they can determine who is an eligible voter.
You have basically a police state, almost like what Germany created back War II in the 30s. So, but the thing is, right now, there is a law on the books. I can't remember the name of it right now. That was created in our nation that allows government agencies to go on the black market and to data brokers and buy this information anyhow.
Right, right. We've got to try to keep politics out of this. So shall we go into the topics I had sent out? And someone would like to choose one of the items. Please give me a number.
Number one really only applies to those folks who have a machine that has 2 or more drives. Because with one drive, you can't do what number one is talking about.
Right. Now that would be somebody might have, an SSD for their C drive and a spinner for your data drive.
The idea is to get the paging file, which is also called virtual memory, an extension of real physical RAM memory, off of the primary drive where your operating system, all your programs, and most of your data is located, to a secondary drive. That speeds things up and prevents some slowdowns and bottlenecks from occurring.
Was this also where your dump file goes?
No. Well, I take that back. The dump file technically is not part of the page file per se, but it's used temporarily to collect the information, and then they create a standalone file, because I've seen the standalone files before.
Yeah, it does say here that if you get a blue screen of death, that Windows starts to write the crash file.
Right, into the page file, and then it gets moved out of the page file later on in order to have an individual file, because the page file has to be available the next time you bring the system up.
It says here that your page file needs to be on a drive as fast as your current drive.
Yeah,
so
technically.
Shift the page file to a mechanical drive.
Well, let's put it this way. If you do have a secondary drive and it's a spinning hard drive, you don't want to put it there. If you've got 2 solid state drives, even if the second one is just a SATA drive, that works. You don't have to have the NVMe for both drives.
Right. Okay, that was an interesting. I see Dennis says 3. We have 3.
Number 3 on your list.
Number 3. And just give me a second here to make a note. 12. And number 3. Windows commands know more about your Wi-Fi than your router does. Now, this one I did not explore yet. Um, I thought this might be of interest. Recently found out that running, they give you a net WAN show WAN report. A command line. And I guess this is what it gives you. I should try this. Let me copy this, see what that does. And CMD.
Administrator privileges.
Yeah, of course.
I
Oh,
open
you should have
command
done
as
that.
open command as admin. There you go. That's the easiest way.
Well, if he had the window open, he could have opened a new window as administrator.
True.
All right, let's see what this is doing.
See, if you don't, most things in the terminal, whether it's Linux or Windows, and to some degree Mac too, require the administrative level more than the non-administrative level.
So it wrote to program data Microsoft Windows WLAN report latest HTML. So it wrote a file. So now I got to go find this file.
Well, it's telling you exact path.
No, it's right there. It's right there.
It gave you the entire pathway.
Right.
Yeah. So select it and then open it.
Just select the whole thing.
And open it in
You
your
want to
browser.
highlight the whole line.
Yeah, I'm trying to get there. There we go.
There, you got it highlighted.
All right.
Yeah, open it in your browser.
Browser.
Either the browsers or Windows Explorer.
Yeah, either way.
There it is.
Wow. Start a connected. Well, this is interesting, but I have no idea what I'm looking at.
It's showing you connections, disconnections, various other events where the adapter started up and closed.
So nothing is red. You're all green.
No errors.
Got it. No green, no red. Red is good.
And network has no connectivity did occur a few times. So you had dropouts.
So this wouldn't tell me if, like, my neighbor knew my password and was using my internet. That wouldn't tell
There
me.
are utilities for that.
But not this
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, this is not the one.
Nope.
But it is telling you lots of good stuff here about all the devices on here, right? Where it's giving us it's giving us Microsoft kernel debug network adapter.
Those are all adapters.
Okay, so this is all the devices that are connected, or just
They are software devices more than they are hardware.
Yeah,
Okay.
many of them are services. Services do the actual work for you through the drivers and the OS.
Yeah.
They're the middleman, the one that always.
I use a
gets the-
program called, has anybody heard of a program called ZenMap?
no.
ZenMap is a graphical user version of Nmap, which started off in Linux and was ported to Windows. And it scans your network. It tells you all of the IP addresses and ports and what they're doing, and you can find out if somebody else on your network was there. It lists everything connected to your Wi-Fi.
You want to show us this, Drew?
Sure. Let me do a quick scan. Oh, wait a minute. I got to put the target in. 192.168.50.24. Do a quick scan. I just want to make sure I have it working.
Yeah.
Before I share it.
In addition, there are other little utilities from Windows that'll do some of what this will do.
Uh, let's see, hit share and share,
Alike.
and it is. Let me go in and hide this thing. There we go. It is starting. This is ZenMap, and it's in the process of starting. I told it to do a quick scan, and there we go. It's listed out all my hosts. These are all the IP addresses on my network. And if I click on one of them, it should show me, oh, by service. So this is, I put in the target of 192.168.50.0/24. So it automatically knows to run nmap minus T4 minus F. You know, at the command line, it can be complicated. But these are all of the hosts that are on my machine. And if I click on one, it tells me what it's running, what ports are available, what ports are not available. So I can tell what everybody's doing. And I'll know if any of these machines are not mine or what they are doing. My machine here that I'm running right now, you can see that port 22 is open for OpenSSH. Because I do have SSH running. 139 and 145 are the Microsoft Windows sharing. 5800 is my VNC. 5900 is VNC. So it shows me a list of all of the computers and what they're doing. If I go to protocol, state, oh, this is the state that they're all in. So you can see a list of all of the open ports and all of the non-open ports. This, if I do an nmap output, this lists everything in one big pile. So it shows every computer and what its MAC address is. What else does it show in here? HTTP is open on this computer at 50.12. So I'll know what ports are open, what people can get to, what they can't get to. And then you scroll down, oh, here's my TiVo box. So it tells you what people are doing. It tells you what's going on. This is an Amazon device, so it's probably one of my Echo speakers. This is a TP link. So that's one of my my router or the hub. Some of these, here's my Magic Jack plug that's on my network. Here's another TiVo box. Winstron NWeb, I don't know what that is. But it shows that I have 14 hosts. So you should know how many hosts you typically have on your network. And if you have more than what you own, then there's somebody on there that's not yours. But that's basically what it does.
Thank you.
There's really nothing else to show. Oh, Bob, you raising a hand for me?
I just want to add, once you're finished, Drew, I want to add that there are other utilities which also will give you a graphical view or a list view like that, a table view of what's going on. One of my favorite ones is by the SZ Corporation. It's a utility called Homedale. And I can take you to their page, but I can't show it to you because you need location services activated in order to use it. And I have location services off during meetings.
Okay.
Oh.
But I can share the page where you can see what it does and what it looks like.
It's called Homedale.
Homedale from the SZ Corporation. You have to be specific about that corporation being the source.
Right.
Okay. because there's a lot of other things called Homedale. This is Homedale. It's a Wi-Fi WLAN monitor, and it shows who's on, what channel they're using. So, Dennis, you can see who's on your network. It shows signal strengths. And it also will show channels and where they overlap, so you can track down interference. In 6 gigahertz, these are much narrower channels and there's much less overlap. But even in 5 gigahertz, it's pretty good. This looks like 2.4 gigahertz. You get a lot of channel overlap there. However, it's perfectly all right for IoT devices, various other kinds of things. And it's probably what your printer's on. It's probably what some of your cable equipment, if you've got it, is on, or what your Fios is on. And you can also connect and disconnect from a Wi-Fi WLAN access point using this utility. So it can do a lot of different things. And it is available for Windows, it's available for Mac, and it's a portable app. It's a portable app. But you have to have location services on in order to use it. And it can tell you where you are. It can locate you.
Which is why it wants location services.
No, it wants it so you can locate everybody else and see who's on your network.
Okay.
So that's one of several tools that are good at that. Drew's got a good one. I got one that's a little more graphical.
Yeah, mine is a port from Linux, so
Yeah.
you have to take that into context.
It does a beautiful job of what it does, and it shows more information, I think, than Homedale. But you do have to learn how to read it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Does anyone have concerns about other people stepping on their network? All right,
Well, I have a very complicated passwords, so I don't worry about it.
Where I live, we've got like about 40 closest neighbors. So, yeah, you should be worried.
Okay. Guess it's a matter of how close your neighbors are and how nosy.
They're all
Oh,
within, there's about 8 or 9 within range.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have my two next door neighbors. I can see what's on their network.
Yeah, if you live in a group living situation like I do, you're going to have a lot of chances that people could, on purpose or accidentally, connect to your network.
Right. Right.
Right. Well, one thing I know I can do, I haven't done it, but I know that I can do, is connect to my next door neighbor's TV, because you can do sharing to a TV through your phone, and I could share my phone screen on their TV.
That'd be interesting. Show them something scary. But they could end up being legally liable if you send something to their network that is inappropriate.
Yeah, like an SNL skit or something like that.
Or if a child sees it.
They're not going to know.
If a
They're
child
not going to know who did it. They're not going to know who connected to it.
In your case, no. But the casual user is running that risk. And if you let your network be penetrated, you are running a risk.
Harry?
Does turning off the broadcasting of the SSID help in that?
Not much.
Well, it'll help because no one else will know that you're there.
Well, they won't be able to find the name of your network, but it might discourage people who accidentally or casually want to get on.
Sometimes
Bluetooth is another special
more of a
thing.
headache than by trying to hide the SSID than it is to just leave it out there. The key is your passphrase for your Wi-Fi must be very strong.
I was saying that Bluetooth has a distance also to get through televisions for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and the older Bluetooth was not well secured.
Yeah, I mean, I tested it once at a restaurant where they had TVs, and it worked. And I quickly turned it off.
I think it would be amusing.
Yeah, Bluetooth
Because
is,
usually the first time that you connect to a TV, it asks for permission.
Yeah.
You know, to connect to it. So that's all that came up. My phone didn't come up on the screen. Just
Yeah.
Restaurants often have presentations, so they have groups in and they can use the TVs. That's might be less difficult to get into.
yeah, some guest networks in various places are ridiculously easy to get onto.
Right. Okay, shall we go on to a new topic?
yes.
Someone like to pick something out from the list, please.
Don't all shout at once. I'm having trouble bringing up the
List
the
is in the email.
yeah, but meeting link. Oh, there it is. Windows 11 is built-in packet analyzer. Windows Power Toys, Keyboard Manager.
Well, I've never heard of the browser Helium number 11, but
Number 11, which was brought up as a topic earlier. Harry was asking about this one, wondering if this was a remnants of days gone by. It's an early alpha build of Windows 11, but Chromium, blah, 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 blah.
No, it says it's a new Chromium browser, so I'm wrong. Okay.
Based on strip back take.
So, Harry, you mentioned the old one. What are you referring to?
I was going by memory, and they say it's a new one, so I'm clearly wrong.
Well, but no.
I thought this was something from a bunch of years ago, but it says it's new, so I'm.
So you're saying, but I don't mean to step on you, but you're saying that there used to be a browser called Helium before?
I thought so.
Okay.
All right.
Bob says no.
I apologize.
No, it's not an apology. It's more that you may know something that we don't.
Not likely. Look at the crowd. Look at the
Look at the crowd.
Not likely.
They're all cheering and they're all okay. So this strip back privacy first approach feature set, there's no password manager included. What is this? It's a stripped down Chrome browser.
Yeah, it's in alpha, it says right now. That means it's the most unstable, incomplete version of a program. The next step when they get it more developed is beta level. That's when you start getting some stable releases periodically, and then eventually goes into production.
who owns this? Microsoft, or is it a different company
A
entirely?
different company.
So it sounds like somebody's trying to get their feet in the door.
Trust me, Microsoft would probably like to have the absolute corner on all browsers, but that ain't going to happen.
Right.
They have one, and they've never been able to really do much with their browsers until the current Edge 2, because there was an Edge 1 that didn't make it, and what you see today is Edge version 2. And that's the best version of a browser Microsoft has really made.
Now, does anybody know if that one can be uninstalled or is it stuck in there?
The Edge 1 or the Edge 2?
2.
There are ways of getting it uninstalled.
Because Microsoft announced that Copilot, they're replacing the Copilot executable software with the Edge browser. And they'll be pumping, Copilot will be delivering Edge to your computer.
Yes. Basically, this is what already exists by other companies, and that is a browser that is an AI, and you do the search through the AI, and they display the content of that search result. So we've had other versions of AI browsers, and from the sounds of what I remember reading, most people are rejecting the AI browsers. So I wouldn't expect the Edge, new Edge version to be that acceptable.
I think Comet takes it to Perplexity the same way.
Now, it turns out Ubuntu did at one time develop a browser. It was for their Ubuntu Touch for phones. And it was based on the Oxide engine.
Okay, so I guess we're not going to be playing around with helium right away because it's only an alpha.
Yeah.
But Drew will give us a full report next month.
Oh, yeah, right. I'll run it in a virtual machine and try it out.
Now we'll get our report. We just want to know, is it crash or does it work?
Well, in alpha, it's probably going to crash a few times.
Using a virtual machine to do testing of OSs or individual software is much safer than if you try and load it on your bare metal. Bare metal meaning the real drive with the real operating system on it. There you're taking a risk of corrupting your system, possibly getting malware infections galore, etc.
Drew, you're doing this all in using Windows 11 Pro and Hyper-V?
Well, I actually have 3 different virtual machine softwares available to me. I've got the open source one from what is it called, VirtualBox, and then I have the VMware Workstation Pro, and I also have the Microsoft. And I'm in the process of trying to start up a virtual machine now.
There is a difference running an OS to check it out, so to speak, between a virtual machine and a bare metal machine. And it can be very significant, especially if you're a gamer or something that is needing high performance, like a gaming machine. You are not going to get the same kind of results in the virtual machine that you would if you install it on bare metal. But it's a good test bed to use virtual machines.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
Drew, are you going to show us something?
Well, I'm waiting for the machine to start up. The first machine that I started up didn't work because I picked the wrong one.
Yeah, that's
So you
one of
put
the
up a VM. How are we going to see the screen on there?
It's just a window running on my computer. It's just like any other window.
Right. A virtual machine, you can see both the host machine's display as well as a single virtual machine. But it starts getting hairy when you have multiple virtual machines, because then it looks like our little pictures here in a Zoom meeting, and then you select which one you want to expand to full screen to do something in. Then you shrink it back down to the small square and select a different square. That gets real tricky, and you got to have a powerful machine, lots and lots of memory, etc.
Yeah, I've got 64.
Most OSs
And
in a virtual setup can run 4 to 8 gigs in memory and do a pretty decent job. But the more memory, the better. But you're splitting your physical resources of cores and RAM memory besides whatever disk space is being taken up by each
Yep.
virtual machine you've got.
Would someone like to pick another topic for us to go into? We're waiting for Julie.
I'm starting up my browser right now in the virtual machine.
Okay.
So let me go into sharing. And I can share this and get rid of these stupid meeting controls. All right, so where is my browser? Here's my browser. And I'm going to go into Helium browser. What is that? Let's get you back online. What did that do? Huh.
It acts like it knocked you off, or it thinks it knocked you off.
Yeah, I don't understand what it did.
Neither
Let's
do
go
I
to
at the
Google.
moment. Let's get you back online, it says. Error, internet disconnected from the virtual
does it?
machine.
Yeah, you got a
In the
Chrome
VM?
down there instead of an internet.
Oh, right. You know what I did? I normally have my Ethernet cable plugged in, and I must have chosen. Let me go into edit the settings of this virtual machine and change my network adapter. Actually, it says external Wi-Fi. That should be connecting. Let me try default switch and see if that works.
It's connected to your PC, but not in your browser or not in your virtual machine.
Well, it's not getting an IP address, which is the problem. I don't know why this virtual machine is not on the network. Let me pick a different virtual machine to start. That might actually work. The nice thing about the Microsoft virtual machines is when you install the Hyper-V software, you have I'm going to go into Jake and type in Jake's password. They give you developer virtual machines for Microsoft. And let's see if I can get on the network in this one. Yeah, this one looks like it's on the net. Yep. So now if I go into Helium browser.
Yeah.
Helium browser. And internet without interruptions. Download Helium for x86-64. And open file. And we'll do an install in the virtual machine. I agree. Install.
Hey Drew, when that's downloading the file, it's downloading it to a temporary drive, and when you close down this VM, it gets erased.
My machine automatically takes snapshots, and what I can do is revert to the snapshot before I even installed Helium. And the next time I boot this computer, it wants to Helium on your taskbar. No, thank you. And here's the Helium browser. Use defaults. Search DuckDuckGo or type a URL. Google.com. So there it is. It works. Don't use Chrome. So there's the Helium browser.
Do you think it would let you into the Zoom meeting, or would it do that, or no? It wouldn't do
It
that.
doesn't know that I'm running Zoom because I'm not running Zoom in the virtual machine. So it doesn't look like it has any menu options. Oh, maybe they're here on the left.
Oh,
Sync photos, file requests, shared, my shares, encryption, crypto folder is locked. I don't know what that means.
Cryptocurrency. It's like a wallet.
Oh, okay. So yeah, this is definitely alpha because there's not much to it.
Well, it's been around for, I think, about a year or better that I know of. So it might be a one-man development of this browser because it's taken a very long time so far, and they haven't even reached the first beta release.
Store, what does store do? Feel good deals. But you can see there's no real menu up here.
there's no ribbons.
There is settings about Helium, more tools, extensions. Delete browsing data. So you can do stuff on startup, make it the default browser. So I don't know what does it say what browser it was built from?
This is built on Chromium.
Okay.
In other words, it's
So
a stripped down version of Chromium, less features than Chromium currently has. And it's probably
right.
de-Googleized. I don't know that for a fact, but one of the problems that some people have is the services tracking you via Google. I do know of a Chromium browser de-Googleized. I don't know if that's the goal of this particular browser or not.
So I just did a search on Dallas Cowboys and there's no Google ads at the top here.
Well, that's good.
It's just the results.
Well, so they're blocking ads for you.
Yeah.
Well,
Oh, well, actually, I wonder if I have AdBlock 360 on here. Yeah, I'm running an ad blocking software on here. Yeah, for those of you who haven't heard about this, there's AdBlock 360 is the latest way to block ads on your computer. It only runs on Windows and it is free. And if I disable the protection, then and refresh this, maybe it will. Yeah, no, it's still not showing the ads inside Google. But AdBlock 360 blocks ads in all of your browsers. It runs at the Windows network level, not in your browser. So it blocks ads in all browsers. The browser doesn't have any extensions. So if you go to YouTube, you can play all the videos without ads, and YouTube's not going to complain. But I'm not going to run an alpha browser on my main computer.
What's on the top left there where it says AI mode? I wonder what that is.
A lot of
That's a Google thing.
that's the thing. A lot of the browsers are now adding in AI agents so you can do searches. And the
Yeah.
next area that seems to be getting popular is adding into the browser an optional VPN. They, in fact, Firefox is offering two. One's free,
Yeah.
and you have up to 50 gigabytes of data per month. And
Yeah.
they also have a paid version, but the two conflict with each other. So you can only have one of those on at any given time.
Right. And I have one virtual machine. It's not this one, but that I did when I installed Firefox. It said, "Here's the free VPN," because they're rolling it out based on your computer. Like my host computer, when I go into Firefox, doesn't have the free VPN option in the menu. But when I installed a new Firefox in a virtual machine, it came up with the option to do the free 50 gigs. But I'm not going to try it because I already have one. So that's basically all there is here. Best privacy by default. Helium blocks ads and trackers by itself. And it has uBlock Origin built in. Does its best to prevent fingerprinting. No extra steps needed. The browser itself has no ads. So maybe if it gets out of alpha, it could be a good browser.
Thank you for testing it out, Drew.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now I have to shrink that down.
Now you gotta
Escape.
stop
And
sharing.
stop sharing. But I gotta hit the escape key, and then hit stop sharing.
Thank you. All right. Someone else want to pick out another topic?
Well, there's topic number 6.
Numbers.
One disk cleanup command recovered 20 gigabytes of Windows Update files.
I don't believe it. I think it's false news.
I followed the link and I know what they did.
You know, you're just so smart. All right. So what is this guy telling us that he recovered 20 gigabytes of updated files? Didn't know they were there.
Yeah, out of the WinSXS folder, because it accumulates obsolete dead code, and periodically you got to go in there to get that cleaned out.
We've talked about this subject before.
And it's only by a DIS command in a terminal.
So that's the only way to clean up. Well, let's get this over.
Yeah, there's supposed to be limited cleanup that happens every 30 days, but it's not very efficient.
Control-C.
This becomes very important when you do an upgrade from version to version, because you can have anywhere between 20 and 35 gigabytes tied up on your storage with the old version.
All right, giving this a whirl on mine. Let's see what it does.
I've mentioned this before in various meetings, this tool.
That's cleanup image. Now you should read further down the article what this is going to do. It will somewhat limit your rollback options.
Okay.
Most people won't run into problems because they have system restore, they have other recovery options. And you have a good backup every month, right?
Before, that was the easy component store.
Now what you're doing there is you're just analyzing to see how much junk it finds that you can get rid of.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's still just scanning. It's not actually doing the cleanup work.
No,
Yeah, it's
no.
scanning it. It'll tell you. It'll
Uh,
tell you what there is.
you would change the analyze to start components cleanup. That's the command to
No.
actually get it to
Okay, so
clean
it
up.
says my component store is 16.81 gigs, basically 15 and a half gigabytes. Well, data last cleanup was just recently.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and if you have a terabyte of disk storage, these amounts, as long as they don't grow, not going to kill you.
Right, right.
No. But it is true. You can have 20 gigabytes or more if you do a lot of changing of programs.
Yes.
So
And also,
16
like I
gigs.
say, when you're doing an upgrade from one version to another, you'll have a big chunk of garbage from that also.
Right.
Normally, your system waits 10 days to get rid of the Windows.old.
So these are the commands that we need to know is basically right there.
Like I say, you would take that /analyze components, change it to start components cleanup, and it actually will take out the garbage.
Okay.
Yeah. And so it'll recover, in your case, maybe 10, 15 gig. This guy had a lot of garbage, probably left over from Windows 10.
Oh, who knows? Especially if you updated from a Windows 7 to a 10 and the 10 to an 11 and had never cleaned that out.
Actually, I'd love someone in this group right here to do this. If they've never done this command on their machine, run it right now.
I did have to do this. I had on my NUC, which had been Windows 10, and then it upgraded to Windows 11, and it was a few years old. I had a Windows update that would not install, and it returned an error that indicated there were corrupt components. This was one of the commands I had to use, and it found stuff that was like 7 years old.
Wow.
In Win side by side on that machine.
You can have older than that if you upgraded from 7 or 8 to 10 first, then upgraded to 11. You could have stuff going back all the way to the original Windows 7, potentially.
Yeah, then I went into the downloads portion of Windows Update. And those folders contained stuff I recognized from way back in Windows 10. It was still there.
Absolutely.
Downloads from Windows Update that never get cleaned up. Yeah, I did. I had to for my case. But I still ended up running the standalone version of this update because there had been an out-of-band patch which apparently never made it upstream to the original update. They never pulled the update.
See, the other thing you can do with the DISM, you would replace that analyze components with scan health, check health, restore health.
Yeah.
Those are finding corruption and then getting them all corrected.
And this is paired with SFC scan now.
Right, SFC scan now. Or system file checker.
Yes.
But you got to understand, if you think you have a problem and you run SFS space /scan now first, you're out of sync, and therefore it'll report more corruption. The best thing to do is the DIS command scan health, then check health. The check health will tell you if you got corruption. Then you do a restore health, and then after that you can run SFC space /scan now to confirm whether all has been repaired or not.
Yeah, so there's a sequence in which they run.
Right.
And this particular thing is a specialized part of DISM that will clean up, it'll force a cleanup of Windows side by side. It will not clean up the Windows Update components.
Right.
Okay. Would someone like to pick up a new topic now? Moving along.
Disabling Copilot. Windows command knows more about your Wi-Fi than the router does.
Which one is that one?
We already did that one.
Oh, you did that one already?
Yeah.
Yeah. Before you logged in.
Okay. How you install a program from an ISO file.
Oh, that's
Which number is that one?
Number 7.
Number 7. Well, something go back. Well, I got an error code on this one, so I can't seem to get to the site. Don't you know that?
Huh. I got it to come up.
I
Yeah,
got there.
I got it now. I don't know. Something happened when I clicked on it. So my bad.
Your ISP was attacking you.
Yeah.
Your age didn't verify.
Yeah.
I'm not in the right state. Okay, so how to mount a file in Microsoft Windows. So you got to download it, of course.
Right. Yeah, this seems kind of obvious. If you mount an ISO file, you can go in and browse it. But I didn't know that you could install software on your host computer. It makes sense that you can do that.
You can mount any ISO image right from File Explorer, and then you can actually have it do the setup that or install however that piece of software works to install it on your system. This is also how you can take a Windows version of an ISO file, mount it in File Explorer, and then do an in-place upgrade to your current version of Windows to try and fix perplexing problems.
Drew, you've got an ISO handy. You want to show us how to mount an ISO?
I don't have any Windows ISOs. I have only Linux ISOs.
Well, that should work.
That you wouldn't want to run on a Windows system because it'll, if you click on the wrong thing, it'll try and install Linux over the top of Windows. Or do a side-by-side, one of the two.
Or you could assume that Drew knows what he's doing and would use an external drive.
Well, all he has to do is have a cable and put the cable in his pants pocket, and that'll take care of it.
I guess it's showing you how to burn an image. It built into Windows, right? If you want to burn an ISO.
Well, ISO images, usually you're downloading them from other sites, okay, including Microsoft. Okay, so you can get Linux ISOs, you can get the ISOs for Linux, you can get a lot of utilities like Live gparted as another example, a partitioner that you can run either by mounting the ISO or you can transfer it with a program like Etcher or Rufus and some other such utilities from an ISO file onto a flash drive and then boot the flash drive on your computer and run the piece of software.
What they're telling you to do is to use a special setting. You're using the Windows Disk Image Burner, but you're burning to Windows Explorer. And that gives you the mount option.
Let's see.
So what you're basically saying is open with Windows Explorer.
Right.
So here I have a good old Windows 7 ISO.
Okay, double click it.
And if I double click on it, it opens
There's
it
the
up.
content. Now,
There's
if
the
you hit,
content on it.
if you double click setup, it's going to try and put 7 on your machine.
Right. And so here is, if you guys can see this, this is the installation box for Windows 7.
That's right.
So it actually does run.
Oh, yes. I've
And
been
if I
doing this
hit
for
install,
years.
it will try to install 7 on this machine.
Or you could just check compatibility online, but I don't know if that still works.
Hey, let's see what that does. Well, something doesn't look right.
No, it's all right. Go to advanced.
Look,
Well, go to advanced.
I get that all the time.
It just says the certificate isn't any good. It expired, obviously.
I think that's for Firefox.
No, it's a Microsoft certificate. So, well, if you don't want to go there, don't go.
I was
They're,
trying to
I'm
get
getting
there.
that all the time.
right now,
Every time.
Microsoft
Yeah.
is replacing their 2011 certifications in a rollout fashion because they expire next month, period. At which time, if you haven't got the new certificates, you may not be able to get online at all because you will not be trusted. When you get, then you have to do some special stuff to get certificates installed on that machine that'll allow you to get back on the internet.
Is that in May or June?
Pardon?
Is that May or June? For those
June is when they expire. I think June 11th or something like that.
All right.
And but a lot of people may already have the new certificate, and a lot of people don't have it yet.
If I recall, this was a topic that was done at last month's Northwest meeting,
Could be the understanding technology.
Understanding Tech. Yeah, it was the topic from last month's Understanding Tech.
Right.
Dennis, yes.
Well, just to clarify, I mean, when we brought this up, we went to this link. The thing in the email said how to, let me read it, how to install a software program from an ISO file. Are you saying then that you have to install the entire ISO file that you're pointing at?
No. What you do is, let's say you bought a antivirus program and it was delivered to you in an ISO file for some stupid reason. You could mount in Windows the ISO file and then install the antivirus software.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's basically what that's saying.
And like I said,
ISO is the container. It's the vehicle.
yeah, it's a compressed container of either a whole operating system or individual applications, such as Live gparted is just a utility for partitioning your system's storage drive, but it comes from the Linux world, and therefore it's thinking it's running Linux when it actually runs the program.
Yeah, what these ISOs have is they have their own tiny little Linux or Windows or whatever that is part of a compressed file system. And that allows you to do the same kinds of things you would do with rescue media, which is a limited version of Windows. Only this is a limited version of Linux.
And Macro Reflect Rescue Media is Linux.
Well, it can be either a Linux environment or it can be a WinPE, WinRE environment.
Well,
For Windows, it normally is a WinPE or WinRE if you choose that.
well, the old 8 that I know he's on the free version, that's a Linux version.
Yeah, that's the Linux. That's Linux only.
Okay, shall we pick a new topic?
Fortunately, there's nothing in here that interests me.
All right, so you can just, you don't need to know how to mute and unmute your PC microphone.
I click on I know how to do it. I can do it with my keyboard, function F1.
Oh, I know
Pick a
what
topic not on the list.
Okay,
How about number 12, checking for whether or not your fan has failed on your laptop?
how do
you
you
stick your finger in the fan.
Yeah, my fan is noisy. I can hear it going right now.
I just take the back off of my, I just take the back off of my framework and see whether the fan will run. But anyway, how do they recommend?
Well, another way is to run hard disk Sentinel, and you can determine the speed, the temperature of your hard drive, and if it's twice what it should be, that could be a problem.
check for dust and debris?
Nah.
Verify power supply? That's a tough one to do.
You got to open your computer to do this.
Right. And this is a laptop, right?
Yep. Which a lot of them are tough to open today.
Very tough to open. Upgrade your device drivers, monitor, like you can use core temp or HW monitor for monitoring the temperature of your cores or the hardware. Anyone got a preference, core temp versus HW monitor?
Not me.
I mean, I use core temp. Core temp I actually have loaded on this machine. I don't know if you could see it. No.
I have core temp on at least one of my machines, but I'm not too worried about it. I know when my laptop's getting hot.
Yep. Pete, you got your hand up?
Yeah, find a friend that bakes and get them close to the machine. If it sucks it in, it works.
Oh. Yeah.
It's hard to find the old smoke cans.
Yeah, I could use, could use this one right here.
Yeah. Core temp. I think I've got that one. Core temp. Core temp is this one.
Damn.
You can see if you guys see this pop up here with core temp?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that one, if you look here, it says core 0 through 3, and it shows you their temperatures, maximum, minimums, their loads. But I've not used HW monitor. Anyone use that particular one?
No.
Okay. I'll have to load that on and see what that is.
HW monitor is by the people who do CPU ID. CPU Z.
You're right.
CPU Z.
What's it do? Does it show you screens? No.
It lists what it can do.
CPU, GPU level hardware monitor, chips, memory, thermal sensors. Oh, it gives you a lot of good stuff instead of just the cores.
Basically, if you have a sensor for it, it can probably monitor it.
Install and config. I hate it when they bounce you around. How do you know which one to get?
Set up in English.
Set up in English.
The zip would be the portable.
Yeah, the zip would be the better one to do.
Yeah, go back and get the zip. That's portable. Now you can download it.
That way you don't have to install it.
Boy, I keep getting flagged with this.
Proceed to download anyway. It's a
Yeah.
relay.
It's these certificates.
Yeah.
For a while, Firefox is going to go nuts. But the bottom thing down there, you can click on it and do it.
CPU ID. Run.
Yeah, just run.
So there you have it.
Wow, that's a lot of good stuff. Except it's in centigrades. I don't want centigrades. I want Fahrenheit.
View, maybe.
Options.
Options.
Celsius, there it is.
Yeah, options. Here you are. Fahrenheit. Hit the OK.
Cores tells you that's pretty nice. Packages, clocks.
So your SSD is running at 100 degrees.
Yeah.
That's a bit warm.
It's a bit warm. It's been running hot today. It normally was like 91 degrees and then
Right.
it shot up to like 100.
Is there a fan anywhere near it?
There's a fan inside the chassis of the laptop.
Is there a heat sink for
Yes.
that? Make sure it's got good contact with its heat sink.
Yeah, that's the only thing I could do. I'd have
The-
to take the heat sink apart.
Yeah.
And it came from the factory that way.
Yeah, there could also be thermal paste that aged out. Or,
It's a new
As-
SSD.
yeah,
So what?
how
The-
new?
The label is a
this year.
little bit of a thermal pad, but it's very lightweight. And some drives need a better, thicker type of pad and may require an aluminum heat sink also. Do you know how old that machine is?
Well, the SSD that I put in here is the one that I put in this summer.
Yeah, but how old is the laptop?
Oh, the laptop, it's 3-4 years old.
Okay, you probably have either a PCIe 3 or a PCI 4, and the 4 runs hotter than a 3.
Can't change that.
I think better material for dissipating heat.
Right.
As Tim says, there are easy solutions and there are more difficult.
Yeah, you can get even from Amazon heat sink and thermal pad that goes with it, double-sided tape adhesive on it, and you just open up your laptop, slap the combination on top of the SSD, and it'll keep it much cooler. You just have to be careful you got enough clearance.
Thank you. Dennis?
Yeah.
Yes, Dennis?
I want to clarify one point. On the machine, I'm trying to eventually get upgraded to Windows 11. I was running it the other day, and the machine itself didn't seem that hot or that warm. But when I went to move the box, the electrical cord, the plug-in cord, goes in, and that was very hot. What is that unusual?
That depends upon the
Not
current.
the computer, but box goes into the wall. It's the adapter, I guess. That
Well,
was
the
very
thing
hot.
is, it depends upon the gauge of the wire and how much amperage you are drawing on the power supply as to how hot the wires get.
This was a laptop, Dennis?
Correct, laptop, right?
Okay, so you were doing an upgrade or an install at the time?
At the time, I don't think so. I think it was just kind of sitting there.
Was the battery depleted?
No, the battery was fully charged.
Okay. Usually
And
those
it
are
was
things
plugged in the
that,
whole time. I had it plugged in the whole time, as a matter of fact. And it was the box, the adapter from the powers plugged in the wall, and then the coming out to the computer, that in between box.
I mean, what you're describing, I've seen before. It's not unusual for the power supply to get real hot. Usually it's because you had a load on the laptop and you're pulling a lot more juice through to have it do something. That's why I was asking those questions like charge the battery, or you're installing software, something that's going to be CPU and hard drive intensive. Those cause more power to be drawn, which has to go through the power supply that's in the brick.
Okay.
And those don't, the only way those dissipate power is through the shell.
Okay.
So is it unusual? It's not unheard of. It does happen.
Okay.
But I will say it is a place to keep your eye on it, because anything that gets electrical that gets really hot, if it gets hot to the touch, can be a source of a fire. So keep an eye on it.
Yeah.
Make sure that your plug that goes the outlet plug, or sorry, the plug that goes into the laptop is fully seated and not dangling.
Yeah, because
Bad contact.
one of the risks you run is if you have a laptop and you run it 24/7, you go to sleep and the battery catches fire.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a good idea to leave the charger plugged into the laptop once the battery's fully charged,
Correct.
unless you are doing something that absolutely needs it, like a scan or a backup.
I could see how I may have done that. It could have been fully charged, and then it sat that way for a few hours. So that could have been.
Yeah.
That's very well could have been.
Yeah. Because I do this laptop that I'm on now, I leave running 24/7. I set the image backup to run when I go to sleep.
Yeah, and in that case, you would leave it plugged in.
This is a heavy laptop that I would, I don't consider it portable.
Well, the other thing with a laptop versus, say, a desktop is the fact that you do have the battery, and the fact that if you have it plugged into AC, it runs at its maximum speed potential. When you take the plug out, you're running on the battery, and it cuts the power consumption dramatically to help reduce drawdown of power on the battery, extending the life of the charge in the battery. But you also reduce the amount of work you can get done in the same period of time as with a AC plugged in.
So does that override your power management settings? Like when you switch it from balance to full?
In a matter of speaking, yes. It's not normally on a laptop versus a desktop. You would have yours either set to balance or energy saving mode. A desktop you would change, because there's no battery, to performance mode. And the thing is whichever way you're going with it on the power management, AC gives you the max speed and performance that it can for that selected either balanced or energy saving mode. And then when you pull the AC power plug out, it drops the total power consumption, because you're on battery only, and they want that battery to last as long on that charge as possible. So the easy way to do that is by reducing CPU frequency and a few other little tricks that are tuning and tweaking, only done on laptops generally.
Create a power plan. I'm looking at my settings now, and it says that I'm running balanced, but I don't see where I could change it to anything.
It should say when plugged in.
Well, sometimes they do have a separate setting. You have these settings when you're plugged in, and these settings when you're on battery only.
Battery.
And that has to do more with timing of when to turn off this display. The display is one of the highest power consuming components on a laptop. The higher quality the display has, the more energy it tends to use.
Processor power management.
But as far as trying to get it not to drop performance when you pull out the AC and running on battery, you have to change from energy saving or balance to performance, and watch your battery go down very fast.
I have a setting right now. I'm in power options, and for processor power management, I have a choice. On battery and plugged in, I could choose the percentage.
Right, but
and right now plugged in is set to 100.
Change advanced power settings.
Yeah.
Down towards the bottom.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. I can change the percentage of the plugged in from, it's at 100 right now.
Right. And
so everybody,
you can change the processor power management section, etc. And your battery also has some settings.
All right. Just so everyone knows, this is Sanford's screen, not Drew's.
Okay.
Okay. So this is, I pulled up the advanced under mine, and this is what shows up under advanced power plan. But
see, when on my laptop, if I go into control panel, hardware, and sound power options,
right,
I don't have any choices other than balanced.
By the way, I've already posted an article that says Microsoft is in Windows determined to kill the rest of control panel this year, period. I don't think they gave it
Drew, you don't have a screen here. It says edit plan settings.
I do have plan settings, but I can't change the plan.
Ah, maybe you need to make a new one. So make a new plan.
But if I make a new plan, your current plan is one. That's only letting you choose when it turns off the display and when the computer sleeps. And then if you go in to change advanced power settings,
Yeah, go.
you'll see that you can change the processor power management.
Yes, and you can also change some settings on battery too, which is below that.
So you have maximum and minimum. Mine
Right.
has power plugged in and on battery.
Right.
So your screens look different than mine.
Look at maximum.
Click on maximum processor state. Yours is set to 100%.
Yeah. On both.
Click on the 100, you can change it.
If you change the battery percentage to say 75%, your battery will last longer. But
Yeah.
also back on the regular screen there, if you click Power Options tab near the top of the other window, you can go backwards and you should see your various plans.
You talking about this one?
No, Power Options straight up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, click that. Now you're going backwards. You're set to a custom plan. You have balanced available. Now, for some people, right below the right side of the custom plan, you might see a circle with a down pointing arrow that allows you to make selection of energy saving or high performance. But you can't get to it only from this screen here.
This is what Drew is missing.
You did a create power plan to create the my custom plan.
Yeah, I have the option to add a custom plan. I just haven't done it.
Right, and I usually don't bother with it. I use the selected plans, and there are usually 3 plans already built into Windows. One is energy saving, one is balanced, which is normal for laptops, and the other one is high performance, or just performance. There's actually performance, high performance, and ultra performance. But usually the latter two, you have to do some customization in the registry to get those to show up.
Oh, and you're not sharing your desktop. You're sharing the app.
I think
If you click on the battery in your taskbar, there's an energy saver. I have an energy saver button.
on battery.
On your taskbar.
Oh, on my taskbar. I'm sorry. My bad. I'm still putzing around.
You have to get out of that share to see it, probably.
Yeah, share the whole desktop.
Yeah.
All right.
Now,
where's your taskbar?
Now click on there, and now you have energy saver up on the left.
Right there.
On the left.
On the left, second one down.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Oh, you can
did that change the brightness of your? Did that change the brightness of your screen?
Yes, it did. When I click it turns down the brightness of my screen.
Yeah.
That's because the display is the highest drawing component in a laptop.
Great. Okay, shall we go to a new topic? We talked power management, batteries, levels, cable management. I said a group discussion I had down on there. And I just wanted to ask, most of us employ any form of cable management in our household.
I should, but I don't.
I'll say that I'm only part of the way there. Maybe 50% of my cables are tied up and the other 50 are not.
Yeah,
Depends on
yeah.
where you're at.
Like, yeah, because I have, from my router, I have a cable going to my hub. And then from the hub, I have a cable running to my TV, to my stereo, to my TiVo box, to my uh, Android TV box. They're all hardwired, and they don't look very good.
My cables just go wherever they want to.
Wherever they want to. Okay. And you don't mind them looking like that. So.
Well, I keep connecting and disconnecting different ones. So, and different plugs as well. So I have about one, two, in this room alone, about 4 power strips.
Okay.
And they are plugged safely into separate outlets. So I have 1 set, 2 sets, 3 sets, 4 sets of backup drives, and then I've got all my other peripherals. Monitors are the main one that plugs in.
So
My system's close to yours. I have 2 power strips and a UPS. And the UPS charges keeps my router and cable modem on, and my TV on, my TiVo. So if I have a brownout, here in Florida, we have a lot of brownouts that go out long enough to reboot stuff.
Yeah.
And my laptop is on battery, so I don't worry about that. So the UPS keeps the router from rebooting.
I didn't mention that between the power strips and the wall, there is a UPS over here. Here, I think it's just Surge Protect. But anyway, I do have a UPS between the computer equipment and the wall.
Harry?
Since people mentioned UPS, I've been thinking about doing that. I mean, I tied up all the cables. I'm at a big desk, so it's all under the desk, but I tend to get my feet caught on it. So I tied everything up for convenience purposes. I wonder what capacity UPS does the average desktop user need?
You have to.
Well, the UPS battery size will tell you the total number of wattage or power that it puts out. You can spend $50 on a battery or $250 on a battery.
Right.
And you'll get more time out of the $200 one.
Sometimes
that's the thing. You have to know all your equipment that you have attached, what the grand total wattage is, and how long of a span of time do you want the UPS to provide power? Because when it reaches that maximum, it's going to shut down, and it tries to shut down your computers properly before it runs out of energy. So you got to decide, do you have it for 30 minutes? Do you have it for 1 hour? What happens when you have 3 hours outage?
And that typically you have consumer grade UPS, which doesn't have that option, and a professional grade UPS, which will connect to it connects to your computer, and it knows when the computer battery is down to a certain percentage, when it's down to a certain percentage, and then it will issue a power down command on your laptop or your computer.
Right.
Yeah, I'm in Florida also, so I know what you're referring to. I don't lose power all that often, but you do have the momentary brownouts and that kind of thing. That's why I was thinking about. Okay.
It's not a bad practice, if you will, if you're in areas that have brownouts, to put a UPS on your delicate devices that are in your house, not necessarily just computers. It can also be your televisions too, which are delicate. And if you've got a big screen TV, putting in a UPS in front of that between the outlet and your TV, even a basic small one, will help you tremendously. It's a very good piece of advice.
It prevents my TV runs the Android operating system, so if I have a brownout, my TV is on a UPS. If I had a brownout, my TV would have to reboot and start up Linux again.
Well, not only that, but brownouts are as bad as voltage surges that occur when electricity comes back on after an outage, and it degrades all electronics that aren't properly protected.
Right.
And
Yeah.
a surge protector only goes for the surges when electricity comes back on. Only a UPS handles brownouts.
Yeah, I've got a half a dozen batteries in my house. One of them is actually just labeled as a hurricane battery. Um, if you have a hurricane or anything at all where you lose power for, more than a day, I use the UPS to charge my cell phone and charge other things that, the weather radio and
Okay. Dennis, you had your hands up?
Yeah, I have one desktop, and I bought a UPS. I have a UPS plugged into it. Now it's 3 years old, and I've always wondered, is there a way to test these things? I mean, I don't want to have
right.
my computer on and say, "Oh, let me test it by pulling the power cord and see if my computer
That's
dies." I mean, how do I test
that's well, there are
Cheap,
some of them that have a test button,
Right.
and mine actually, when the battery fails, it starts beeping,
the better
and I have a
quality
constant steady beep.
the better quality ones do have some kind of a test facility. Real cheap ones, small ones, have nothing to tell you whether it's the
Yeah,
battery's going dead or not,
yeah,
or how
mine
much
beep.
charge it's got.
So,
Yeah,
does anyone
my-
have an idea what's the longevity of the lead acid batteries in those?
Most
You're
of them,
supposed to change them 3 to 5 years.
3 to 5
Yeah,
years.
mine die naturally in about that time,
yeah.
and then I just go up to the UPS, the Battery Plus store, and they put in a new one.
Yeah. I did have a UPS that was big enough so it was worth replacing the batteries, and I did it twice before I decided probably that unit after 5 or 6 years had they've got solenoids in there for the surge protect. Those burn out
Well,
over time.
also too, within the UPS, you have surge protection devices. As the surge occurs, it degrades those components, so eventually the surge protection may no longer be there. And this applies to regular strips that have surge protection. After a certain amount of hits from surges, they become just a plain, ordinary, unprotected power strip.
Mhm.
Drew said something just now that kind of stunned me. Drew, did you say that, like, when you go to Batteries Plus for a phone battery or a watch battery, you can take in your UPS and get a battery?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, they
They
sell
carry lead acid batteries for cars, motorcycles, and UPSs. Yeah.
You
Yeah,
have to take it in and then have to install it, or how does that work?
I give them the UPS. They go to the shelf where the batteries are, pick out the one that fits it, and they change it.
Yeah, and I had one that I could get into, and I knew how it worked, so I just simply mail ordered one. Actually, they come in pairs.
It
Battery
never
Plus
plays-
will even change the battery in your car.
You never replace it forever, Drew? I mean,
Yeah, if I needed a new battery in my car, I could drive to Battery Plus. They'll test the battery and confirm that it needs to be replaced. And then if it does, they'll sell me a new one and they'll actually install it for me. They'll go out into the parking spot and put it in.
I
Yeah,
didn't know that.
they do all kinds of batteries.
Yeah, the batteries that are used in backup devices are usually standard simple clips. They use like I think it's like is it an alligator clip that clips on those?
It's kind of a slot and groove.
It's a slot and groove. Thank you.
Yeah.
Clip. So they're just a simple tab.
Yeah.
So they
Yeah.
unplug and plug in real easy. The only thing you need to make sure is you put red on positive.
Well, you
Well,
also
the thing that The
most
thing
of,
that concerns me is when I bring it there, they recycle my old battery for me.
yeah,
Right.
most of the batteries are like you would have on a motorcycle, a lawn tractor, other types of devices and that. And you can have a regular auto shop recycle the lead acid batteries.
There is a difference. The ones in power supplies are gel type. They are not liquid
Right.
lead acid. Your car battery is most likely liquid.
Right, it is, but the thing is, for example, I have a AutoZone closer to me than any kind of a battery shop, and
Right.
I can take the battery from a UPS over there, and they'll recycle it. I'm not
Yeah.
saying everybody will,
They-
but most do.
I've seen commercials on TV where they'll test and change your battery for you in your car.
Yes. That's right. And I think I have an O'Reilly very close to that AutoZone too. They would do the same thing.
This is pictures of the batteries that are generally used in UPS
Right.
backup, and they're
Yeah, and if can you zone in on that one that says Mighty Max battery? It has the terminals on the top. One's red and one's
yeah, got that here. This one, Mighty Max.
or the third one in. See how it has a red terminal on the top and a
Yeah.
white terminal on top?
Red and black.
I'm
Red and
trying to get
black.
it to blow up the picture, but it won't. It keeps giving me,
On the right hand panel you can see,
yeah.
and it shows
or if you
very
hit
clearly where the
Control
red
plus
is.
plus, hit Control plus plus, and it'll zoom in on the battery.
Control. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah,
All right, let me move this out of the way. So this one has the red on the positive, nothing on the negative, so that's always black.
Yep.
This is a tall version. Depends on what your needs are, but these are similar to the batteries that are needed.
And they'll see on the side exactly what kind of specs they've got.
Right. But you can order these online and get them shipped to you, or you can go to the battery store.
Yeah.
but you have to make sure about the shipping charges because if you pay the shipping, it's going to be a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These are considered hazardous material, so the shipping is expensive.
Yep. And also you have to dispose of them properly too.
Right.
But you could do an in-store pickup someplace like Home Depot
Right.
if they carry your type. They carry all kinds of batteries.
Yeah,
Cordless tool
Like-
batteries, all kinds of stuff.
A lot of those
And-
batteries, like I said, they're used in like lawnmowers, especially riding lawnmowers,
Hmm.
motorcycles, etc.
Kids
and
toys.
for those of you who don't know, if you go to Home Depot and buy on their website, go to the website, you can buy products that they sell that they don't have in the store. And they'll free ship it to the store because they'll use their regular delivery trucks
Right.
to bring it to the store, and then you can go pick it up without paying a shipping fee.
Right. Okay, any other last questions for the group? With that, I will stop.
9:50.